Welcome, Army fans. This is Joe Iacono with GoBlackKnights.com, along with former Army quarterbacks Kelvin Hopkins and Christian Anderson. We are on a quarterback panel today talking about the Army-Navy game. Pretty excited to have these guys out. But before we get started, wanted to let everybody know that the great Ahmad Bradshaw, which is how we refer to him here at GBK. The great Ahmad Bradshaw wanted to join in, but he is in the process of moving this weekend. So I couldn't get Ahmad on the call, but he is sad that he couldn't make it. Wanted to talk with his buddies, Kelvin and Christian, and all the fans out here at GBK, but that's where we are. Let's go ahead and just start with some introductions for the Army fan base out there in GBK land. Kelvin, go ahead and just introduce yourself, what years you started at quarterback in the Army-Navy game, what West Point class you are, and what you've been doing in or out of the Army since graduation.
Yeah, no, so like you said, Kelvin Hopkins, graduated class of 2020. I started 2018 Army Navy. I was a freshman on the 2016 team that broke the streak. So that was a great experience for me. I was team captain in 2019. Currently, I'm stationed at Fort Stewart, Georgia. I'm an armor officer with 5-7 Cavalry. Yeah, that's it.
Nice. Christian, same question for you.
All righty. Christian Anderson graduated last year, December 2021. Currently, I started in 2019 against Navy. That was my first Navy game. And I also started last year. Currently in Fort Eustis, Virginia, transportation officer. Just finished Bullock in June. So I've been here for about 6 months now.
Nice. And Kelvin, are you captain yet or still first lieutenant?
I'm still first lieutenant.
Okay. I wasn't sure if they changed. I know with us, it used to be 4 years. So I know you're getting close probably. So
Yeah, right around the 3-year mark. That's when they're starting to do it nowadays. So between 3 and 4.
Okay, good stuff. So Kelvin, we'll start with you. You know, as you mentioned, you were the starter in the 2018 game, but also got to sit on the sidelines and watch Ahmad quarterback Army to 2 victories in 2016 and 2017. What did you learn from watching Ahmad, and specifically how to lead the offense and quarterback in this game, if it is any different from quarterbacking, you know, a regular football game?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a little different. Especially because both offenses run ball control offenses. So really the biggest difference is just kind of trying to play mistake-free football, limiting the mistakes that you make, especially turnovers, because the ball is so crucial and that time of possession is so crucial when you're playing Navy. So I guess that's really the biggest thing that I took away from, Ahmad. You look back at 2017 specifically, it was the snow game. So, ball handling was a big deal. I remember our coaches stressed it a lot. So just kind of protecting the ball. And it came down to, one possession, missed field goal by them. So it's things like that that are crucial that help you win. So when you're playing quarterback, you start to think about that a little bit more, considering you're handling the ball more than anybody else on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that 2017 game. What I remember about it specifically, not just that it was snowing, but the snow, it was like a super wet snow, and it was like in different chunks. So depending on where the ball was spotted, like for Bryce and Ahmad, like it could have been like in the middle of like a basically puddle of snow on certain snaps. And I was super impressed that he didn't fumble at all during that game, or really didn't even seem to lose a handle, and then managed to make that really good pass to Kalen Holt, kind of backpedaling, throwing it off his back foot in that weather. That was super impressive.
Yeah. No, that's a memory I forgot I had. He definitely did. And it was a great catch by Kalen.
Yeah.
Inches off the ground in the snow.
Yep. Yeah, that was awesome. That was probably one of the key plays in the game because it definitely opened up the offense, kind of that big play. We'll talk about that as we go on. Christian, so similar question for you. You started young in Army Navy in 2019, but 2018 I think was your plebe year, and right, so you got to watch Kelvin.
Yep,
Yeah,
I did.
so
That was my yuck year actually.
okay, so what did same question for you. What did you learn from watching Kelvin run the offense in 2018?
Yeah, I mean both. I got actually to watch Ahmad and K-Hop play. I learned from both of them. I think the biggest thing I learned from both of them was just the way they prepared for the game. Those couple weeks leading up to the game, the amount of film they would watch, the little things they would be able to notice about the defense. That's something I definitely took away. And I think K-Hop, one thing I took away from him is just his ability to make a play in a big moment. In the Navy game, so like specifically the passing plays. The coaches always trusted him to make a good decision, whether it was throwing it away or making that pass. He would always be able to make it. So that's one thing I try to do is just make the play that's there and not just try to make a play if it's not there. So
Absolutely, right? Because I think the one thing we've learned is any turnovers in Army Navy are magnified that much more
yeah,
because of the ball control type offense that both teams play that Kelvin just mentioned. So, Kelvin, going back to you and the 2018 team, that was really one of the greatest teams in Army history. The only 11-win team in the history of Army football. Definitely the best team I've seen in my lifetime. That included an absolute beatdown of Houston in the Armed Forces Bowl. Even though your 2018 team was heavily favored coming into the Army Navy game, the outcome was still in doubt going into the fourth quarter. And what do in addition to maybe, I think part of it might be the fact that both teams do run that similar ball control type offense that you mentioned. What makes these games so competitive regardless of where the two teams are coming into the game?
Um, ooh, honestly, it's one of those games where records doesn't matter. And I think that's kind of what makes Army Navy special. I mean, you look at 2016, we were having a good year for the first time in a while. And Navy was having a good year. They were headed to bowl game, just played in the AAC conference championship, and we won that game because it's one of those games where people just play a little bit harder. Rivalry games do that to you. But I think specifically for me and what I've always recognized about the game is that Navy and Army players just play a little bit harder, especially the seniors. Our football careers are dwindling down. It's a few snaps left in the game, left in your career. And, this is probably one of the last big ones you got. And there's guys that play it that way. And the hits hurt a little bit more. People hit harder, people play harder. So I think that really plays a big factor into it is that this is for some people the last football game that they'll ever play in, and they play it that way. And that's why it turns out the way. Nobody wants to finish their careers with an L. And you see that emotion and you see that excitement from both sides.
Yep, I think that's a really good point. I mean, you always, it's very cliche. You hear throw the records out, but in this game, you really do. I
Absolutely.
remember my Cal year, uh, Army wasn't having the greatest year, kind of like your first year, Kelvin, and the game I'm about to talk to, Christian, the 2019 game. Army was decimated by injuries. My Cal year, we had a wide receiver actually playing quarterback because we had so many quarterbacks get hurt. And we came into the game 4-6. Navy was 0-10, and they whipped us. It was
Yeah.
24-7. It was ugly. So, Christian, going to the 2019 game, it really didn't go the way anyone at Army wanted it to go. But if I'm not mistaken, it was your first start,
it was, yes,
right?
sir. Mm-hmm.
As a yearling, due to injuries to K-Hop and Jabari as well. Can you talk about what your emotions were like going into that game, being your first college start, in front of 80,000 people? What was that all about?
I tell you, he was nervous.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I was excited. I was definitely very excited. I had Coach Ware, quarterback coach at the time. He kind of pulled me aside and was like, "Yeah, K Hop's not doing too well physically. We think you played well again. We played Hawaii the week before, and he was like, "Yeah, I think you played well against them. We're gonna have you start the Navy game." And I was like, there were so many emotions going on in my head because I was like, damn, this is gonna be my first collegiate start and the biggest game in the nation. Like, I was extremely excited. I was humbled. But I was so nervous, like ridiculously nervous. And I think it wasn't until I started playing though that nervousness kind of went down after that first snap. It kind of went down a little bit. And I kind of just got to playing. But yeah, I was definitely like very nervous, but I think the coaches prepared me well to kind of be in that moment. And I was just glad to have that opportunity to play in that game, even though it didn't go the way we wanted it to go.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's only fair, right? I mean, we're West Point cadets, we're not going to make excuses, but I mean, it's only fair to say that, I mean, that was a pretty banged up version of the Army football team that went into that game that day. So, I think that had a lot to do with it. But what I was going to talk about is you mentioned how once you started playing, you kind of loosened up a little bit. And if I'm not mistaken, you actually had the first score of that game. You had a pretty nice TD run. Did that kind of loosen you up a little bit and shake the
Yeah.
cobwebs out a little?
Oh yeah, I was pumped up. Like that was my first Army Navy touchdown. It was freaking 80,000 people screaming at me. It was crazy. It was definitely like up to that point the highlight of my football career, getting that touchdown. And I felt like I was on top of the world at that moment. Like but yeah, it was good. I felt like after that, I felt like just in the game. I was just talking to Coach Ware, just following the game plan as best as I could after that.
And stuff. Kelvin, you're laughing pretty hard over there. Tell me, I think you've got a pretty good perspective for the fans. Tell me, clearly you were talking to Christian that day, kind of maybe helping coach him up a little bit. Give us your perspective on Christian that day.
Um, yeah, no, I mean everything that he says is exactly how I remember it. And I didn't envy him. I got to have my first start in a much more relaxed environment. But for him, for that one, I think that's tough on anybody. Just the amplification of what Army Navy is. But he handled it well. He had prepared well. There was a few practices where I was out and Christian was locked in as the starter. I'd argue he definitely knew the game plan better than I did at that point because he had been practicing it and he had been in there and that was the decision that was made and he rolled with it. And that touchdown, I was just as turned as he was just because just to see somebody work, when you're beside each other and you go through the motions of practice every day and you're in the same room, to see somebody get rewarded for it, it's exciting. So for him to have that touchdown was a big moment for me personally, to see that success for him and have that moment, because there's nothing like Army Navy, and scoring in Army Navy is a memory that you'll hold on to forever. So for him to have that in his first start and to have that was big for me. Unfortunately, it didn't go the way we wanted it to in the end, but I think a lot of people and, for myself and Christian probably grew up that day and that he probably carried that going forward in his career.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kelvin. I know from talking to a lot of the players the last couple of years that game was kind of the start of the successful 2020 CIC championship season that Army had. Is that game didn't go the way anybody wanted it to, and the team really focused hard on kind of getting things right in 2020. So I think that had a lot to do with it. And definitely Christian's play in that game was, stands out as really good. Like you said, especially for your first start. I mean, I know you guys have friends who aren't grads, and really the only Army game that everybody pays attention to if you're not a grad is the Army Navy game. So like you said, the start in that game was huge. I can't imagine the pressure of that. So, I mean, I think you handled it pretty well. And so does the whole Army fan base. And you probably grew up really quickly that day as a quarterback. So that's great. I mean, Kelvin, though, I got to tell you, and we're going to stay on Army Navy here, so I'm not going to get distracted. But even though your first start was in a lot lower pressure environment, everyone who's an Army fan remembers you coming into the Temple game in 2017. That you want to talk about high pressure. That was about, I'm literally sitting there going, this game's over. We're done.
That was one of the
there's
greatest
no
games
way.
I've ever seen.
And then little did I know, it was like, wow, this Hopkins kid can chuck the ball around New York. This is impressive.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't envy Christian for starting his first game in Army Navy, but that's definitely not how I pictured my first like meaningful snaps in college football going.
Yeah.
And it's funny because the week before I was really mad because we had just played Eastern Michigan, and we practiced
Mhm.
1 minute every day, like at least 3 times a week. So I was prepared for it. I wanted to do it. And I thought we were going to do it against Eastern Michigan. And then James Gibson made the stop at the goal line when they went for 2 to win the game.
Yeah.
And I remember coming to him in the locker room. I'm like, yo, like I was locked in. I was ready to go. Like you ruined it. That was my chance to do something. He was, we laughed it off together. And then lo and
The
behold,
only
a week
guy on the
later.
planet who was mad Gibby made that stop was
Oh, 100%. I was
No,
so upset.
I'm kidding.
And no, I really was. And not from like a standpoint of like, or for myself. It was just like I spent that whole quarter like I might have to do this. I might have to do this. I didn't even get to enjoy the moment because I was so, like I had to calm myself back down. But like a week later, I paid the piper for saying that to him because we go Temple and it's like, okay, well, you talked all that junk to Gibby about it. Now you got to actually go prove it. And that was probably the biggest moment of my football career, for sure. Just to go out there and come through and something that I always prided myself in as a player was to be a good passer. So to come through in that way and win that game in the fashion that we did was exciting. And like you said, nobody expected us to do it. You run a triple option, you get under 2 minutes, most people think it's over.
Yeah.
So to go out there and do the things that we did on that drive will forever be special to me.
Yep, absolutely. Christian, you were gonna comment on that. You were gonna say something? Go ahead.
No, I mean, I just remember because I think that was my freshman year. That was the week I was able to travel because I was the scout player of the week. So I was there on the sidelines with him. And I was just thinking, like, yo, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, I never would have expected that game to end the way it did. And I just remember in the locker room, everybody was going crazy. Like, people was lifting up K-Hop. It was just, I still remember it to this day. It was very special. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hold those thoughts because I'm going to come back a little bit up to what you said, Kelvin, about your ability to throw the ball and be a dual threat. And I think Christian falls into the same category.
For sure.
I'm going to come back to some of that as it relates to Army Navy in a little bit later on in the interview. But yeah, that 2017 team, it's funny when you look at the 2022 team, and Coach Munkins even mentioned this in a couple of his interviews. I called the 2017 team affectionately the Cardiac Cadets because it was like every game, like you had Eastern Michigan, Temple, Navy, like there were so many of those games. Like the only game that wasn't a close game was Air Force in Colorado Springs. Like you guys went in and nuked them. But it was, and you look at this year's team, and even watching the conference championships last week, I'm like, gosh, like Troy won a conference championship, UTSA won a conference championship, and like we were like one mistake away from winning both of those games. Like this team, even though they're coming into the game with a 5-6 record, they're really not, right. Coach Munkett talks about it all the time. There's a couple plays that turn every ball game, and the great teams find the way to make those plays. And just so far for the 22 team, it hasn't worked out that way in the close ball games. I mean, they're a couple plays away from being 7-4 or 8-3. What are your thoughts about that, Kelvin?
No, I mean, I think that's put perfectly. Like the margin of error in football is so small. And I don't think people can really understand how small it is until you're in it. And Coach Munkin used to say it all the time. And, the more football I watch after football, I really realize is winning football games is really hard.
Yeah, could you repeat that for the entire GBK fan base, please?
Like
Because I
winning
don't think
football
people
games is very
understand.
hard.
Like,
The things that go into winning a football game is really hard. And the hardest part is that the other team wants to win just as bad as you. And I think that's just, I don't think it's a desire thing. I don't think it's anything like that with this team. It's just the ball hasn't rolled their way, sometimes. And some plays are, like he said, there's plays that are there to be made and they're just not being made. And that's unfortunate, but I think they're a better team than the record says for sure. They play hard, they compete. There hasn't been a single game that they've been out of really that I've watched, that I've seen. And it's just that margin of error. And when you can minimize it and squeeze it and make those plays, That's the difference between being a 9 and 10 win team versus being a 5-win team. And that doesn't make you a bad team. That doesn't make your players bad. It's just sometimes those plays just bite you in the butt.
Yep. See, GBK subscribers, it's not just me. You just heard from one of the greatest Army quarterbacks of all time, Mr. 1,000,000, as I call him. It's really hard to win a college football game. So when I write that, don't get mad at me.
It is very hard, very hard.
Exactly. So, Kelvin, talking about games that are hard to win, let's go to the 2018 game. And, something I think all the Army fans want to know, it was either late Q3 or early Q4. We had a 4th and short, and you had a run, and it looked like to everyone in the stadium, you had a first down. But after the longest, and I watch a lot of college football. After the longest review I've ever seen in college football history, the refs overturned the call and gave the ball to Navy. The question that inquiring Army fans want to know, Kelvin, is after watching that play on film, was there any question for you or Coach Ware or anyone else in the room that you had the first down?
I still to this day think I got it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was 100% close. And I guess video review says that I didn't get it, but that's fine. I distinctly remember.
I thought video review to me looked like you still got it. So.
I did, whatever. It's not my call to make, but as a football player, you're very aware of things that you do. And I remember distinctly keeping my knees off the ground on purpose as I lunged so they wouldn't call me down. So like I said, to this day, I still think I got it.
Yeah, you're not the only one. I mean, we got to see it so many times because the replay took so long. I'm like, okay, like you said, you clearly dove. You clearly kept your knees off the ground. It was crazy. One of the weirdest. I was like, yeah, they're trying to make this game closer than it needs to be. So
that's one of those plays, that determines a win and a loss.
Yeah.
We get that first down. They may never see the ball again. We may go off.
You guys would have won by 2 or 3 touchdowns. Yep.
Yeah, that's just how it goes. That's just how football goes.
On that same line, in your opinion, Kelvin, what were some of the key plays that sealed the win for Army in that 2018 game? I remember specifically the big strip sack by Kenneth Brinson towards the end of the game. Anything else you can think of?
And they're all going to be defensive plays. I'm not going to lie to you.
Defense played great that day.
Yeah. Yep. So there were 3 big ones. They were driving to score, and Jalen McClinton forced a fumble on like the 6-yard line. And we got it. We didn't do anything with it on offense, but it kept them out the end zone. Yep. So that was a huge play. Elijah Riley on a reverse pass up the sideline right before the strip sack. The quarterback booted out and was wide open, and Elijah came off his man and hit him out of bounds and broke it up. That set up the fumble recovery by Kenny. So if he doesn't make that play, we don't even get the ball back to close it out. So I think, and then obviously the strip sack. I think those would be the 3 plays that really closed that game out for us, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. The defense played great that day. That was an outstanding game by them. And in fact, Navy I think they ran a screen to Malcolm Perry, and that was like the only play they ran on offense all day that went anywhere. It was a complete shutdown. It was crazy. So Christian, let's turn our attention to last year's game at MetLife. Army came in heavily favored, but Navy had a really good defensive game plan. I think after your opening salvo, that really nice 54-yard touchdown run, I think a lot of people thought like, okay, this day is going to go really well. Their defense really seemed to clamp down, especially in the red zone. And what were they doing that made it so tough to move the ball against them in the red zone and really all together in the second half? You can feel to speak freely on this one. I mean, you no longer play for Army. I know you're going to give proper answers, but we have some opinions. So
That's the thing. I think we moved the ball very well. It's just when we got towards the red zone, I feel like there was no longer that threat of the pass, in my opinion. I think we were passing the ball pretty effectively in the first half. And then once we got closer to the red zone, they were like, okay, there's no more threat of that pass. We're just gonna bring everybody in the box, and then there was nothing we could do at that point. So I think they did a good job, I think, doing that. And there just wasn't really any holes for us to exploit when we were in the running game. I think they had a good scouting report on where and what type of runs we like to do when we got to the red zone, and they did a good job stopping us on those plays.
Yep. So I'm just gonna ask. It's you
I
said
already
it, and
know.
I love. Don't get me wrong. I
I
love
already
TT.
know what.
I
I already,
absolutely love the kid. But what was the thought? And coaches know stuff that as fans we'll never know. I'm not. Don't take this the wrong way. Coaches know way more than we do. What was the thought process to pull you and go with TT in the red zone?
I get this question so many times. So many times. So the reality of the situation is I got hurt week
Okay.
4 against Miami of Ohio. And then when I came back week 7, I think, whenever we played Wake Forest, I came back, got hurt again, re-injured the same shoulder. So once that happened, there was kind of they were hesitant to kind of put me in running situations because they didn't want to re-injure myself. So once I came back against Air Force, that's when they started doing the rotation with me and TT because they were just worried about me re-injuring that shoulder on a running play. They didn't want me to take as many hits throughout the season. So that was kind of their mindset going into the game and throughout the rest of the season.
That's really good stuff. And one of the things I think I've learned since I've been reporting with GBK the last 2 years, and I tell my friends who are former players or just Army fans in general, is when something doesn't seem to make sense. And Coach Monken, rightfully so, always holds injury information very close to the vest.
Yeah.
I always tell people when something doesn't seem to make sense, there's probably an injury involved.
Yeah. So
I've seen it. Like, remember when Andy
part.
Davidson had all those fumbles in the 2016 game? And I was like, that's not like him. He's usually very reliable with the ball. Well, found out his shoulder was all tore up going into that game. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks for the
that
insight.
played a big part. Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate that. So along those lines, guys, as former Army QBs, in the last 3 games against Army Navy, Army's only been able to manage 1 offensive touchdown in each of those 3 games. What can TT and the Army offense do to really break loose and get some more points on the scoreboard tomorrow? Because it's going to take more than 1 touchdown to win. Christian, go ahead. You've thought about this one, I can tell. So go ahead.
I feel like when it comes to this game, it's always the team that can do something out of the ordinary. Last year Navy, they came out and they were doing a lot of spread formation, spreading out the defense. So I think whoever can I forgot what the word is, but whoever can bring out something different to show that's not on film, that will give them a little bit of an advantage.
Yep. Yeah, you're exactly right. That's what always seems to make the big plays in this one. Yeah. Kelvin, thoughts?
Nah, I agree 100%, and that's exactly what I would say. I think the word, maybe I'm wrong, but it would be wrinkle.
Yes, that's it. That's
yeah,
cool.
All right.
Wrinkle, breaking tendency, whatever the case. Yeah.
Because we're so similar, and both defenses know this offense so well. It's whatever team shows up with the best wrinkle and gets it working is normally the team that wins. You look back at 2016, we came out with a lot of gun stuff. We had a young Kel Walker that a lot of people didn't know about. He was for 96 yards.
He had a great game. Yeah.
I'd hate to say that he was the wrinkle, but he was the wrinkle.
He was the wrinkle. Him and the Utah draw shovel passes.
Yep.
To him and Joe Walker, I think, were big too. Yep.
2017, we had a new play in. I'm not gonna say what it was, but we had a new play in, and that rode us for the back half of the season. And it was the same thing with that Navy game. 2018, We threw the ball very well. We had a lot more gun stuff that we did. And that's just speaking off what I know game plan wise. So
Yeah.
it just, it's all about what wrinkle gets going for which team and what big plays hit. I think the game really comes down to big plays and
Yeah.
who has the best wrinkle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I completely agree. I think, I was specifically thinking of 2017 when I don't know, Kelvin, if the plays out of the formation were the same or different from Air Force, but that we had shown a lot of like that diamond formation with Ahmad back there and the gun. And that was, I know Navy didn't game plan a ton for that, or if they did, they game planned off what they saw against Air Force. But I'm sure Brent Davis and the offensive staff ran some different stuff out of it against Navy.
Yep.
So good
You're
stuff.
spot on what play it was. That's funny.
That's good. So both of you guys are known for being, especially for the Army offense, in my opinion, really good dual threat quarterbacks. Both of you guys could throw the ball really well and run it really well. What's the importance, and Christian, you kind of already talked to it last year in the red zone. What's the importance of maybe not even completing big passes, but having that threat there to keep the defense honest?
Yeah, I think it's very important. Like I said, like when you have just the threat of being able to hit a big pass, because when we pass the ball, most of the time it's in order to get a touchdown because we see that the safeties, the corners are all supporting, which will leave a touchdown possibility. So if you just have that threat, it keeps the safeties, it keeps the corners, it keeps them from just firing off and being able to support the run. So just having that threat there, it significantly increases our ability to run the ball.
Absolutely. Kelvin, what's your opinion on that?
No, I agree 100% with what Christian said. Just that threat that the DBs have to play it true. They can't get caught looking in the backfield. I look back at 2017. We had a very dominant O line that year, and Ahmad rushed for 1,700 yards or what it was. And we didn't throw the ball much, and they stacked the box. I mean, there were games where it was 10 people in the box stopping the run,
Right.
and we'd still do it. But
Yeah.
having that ability to go over top removes that ability to do that. You got to play DBs back deep. They have to play it honest and be prepared for the pass. And that's where you get looser run holes and you get to the edge a little bit more. So it definitely helps the offense when just the coaching staff has to preach that you can't just run to the line and expect run every play.
Yep. No, I completely agree with that, Kelvin. I think we all remember the 2017 season and how effective the running game was behind Bryce Holland and Brett Toth and that whole crew.
Yeah.
But my opinion, I don't think it's fair to expect the O-line to perform at that level every single year,
Yeah.
game after game after game when the team's putting 9 and 10 guys in the box. There's everybody, because everybody remembers 2017 and they're like, oh, we don't need to throw it to win. And I'm like, guys, that's just not like a consistent, accurate game plan that's going to work
Not
with
at all.
every single team Army puts on the field.
No, not at all. And that's going to always be our bread and butter. That's not going to
Yeah.
change. And I don't think that's necessarily the answer anyway. But, when you can add that dimension to your offense, when you can call plays, with the expectation that we can go over top, it just changes what happens up front, what the defense can do. And, it gives a little bit more confidence and freedom for the O-line in general. So.
Absolutely. 100% agree. All right. Last question, Christian. What are you hoping to see tomorrow, and what's your prediction for the game?
Oh man, I'm just hoping to see them play hard. I'm hoping that TT, my dog, he goes off, gets like 150 yards, 2 tuds. That's what I want to see. I just want to
Nice.
see complete dominance on the offensive side. Just to get back from last year, how we didn't perform well in the second half. I know they're licking the chops to get back out there and get some payback from last year. So I want to see them just play hard, run the ball. And then on defense, I want to see, Quell stuffing the run, giving up no points. So I'm excited. I think my prediction for the game, I'm going to go with 21 skunk, 21-0 Army.
Nice. That would be awesome. That would make me really happy, and a lot of
Yeah.
Army fans. That would make all of us happy. A low blood pressure Army Navy game would be lovely. And just for the record, I want to say before I go to Kelvin for a prediction, TT can throw the football. They just have to set him up right, get him in the right play,
He can
and
get it there.
he's
He
shown
can
the
get it
ability to
there.
complete the pass. So,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing about TT. I hate when people try to say he can't do
Yeah.
this and that. He's honestly he's definitely way smarter throwing the ball than I was. I was like they may not throw it a bunch with him, but he throws it away. He's very smart. He tucks it and runs.
I try to tell people like that was like trying to talk after the Army Navy game, like every single QB we had in the QB room was able to do the same thing as a starter. Like we all prepared the same way. Everybody was able to do the same type of thing. So there was like I knew TT would be able to play and perform in the Navy game. I had no issues with him coming into the game.
Yeah. I mean, to me, when they get him on the perimeter and give him like a run pass option kind of thing in a boot or something like that, I mean, he can throw it as well as anybody on the team. So, yeah,
100%.
Go ahead, Kelvin. What do you want to see tomorrow? What's your prediction for your game?
Same thing as Christian. I just want to see tough football. I love old school football. I love, bloody arms and wrist tape hanging off. So I think this is the perfect game for that. I want to see our boys get after it and show them, that there's really a difference in the programs. There's a difference to how we do things. So I'm excited to see them get after it. I'm excited to see TT play. TT was there my entire career there. It's a really good friend of mine. I'm excited to watch him play in his last Army Navy game. So, I'm hoping he goes out for 150 and 2 tugs, like Christian said. But stats aside, I don't care who gets it. I don't care who scores, as long as we get a win, and we can celebrate. Let's see, prediction. I'm gonna go big. I think it's gonna be a relatively high scoring game. I'm gonna say 30. I'm gonna say 35 to 21 our way. Army wins.
That would be wild. I can't wait to interview Coach Monken after the game if we score 35 and give up 21. That would be super interesting.
I'd be excited to watch it out the gate. That was always my biggest goal with Army Navy was I wanted to be a high scoring game. Like I wanted to get exciting. So I hope for that every year. So that'll be my prediction forever. It'll be a high scoring game and it'll get exciting and it'll be touchdowns all day, big plays.
That would be super cool. I think it would elevate because there is that segment of the college football fan base out there that's like, oh, the game's boring. Well, I'm like, no, it's not. It's a defensive football game. It's just smash mouth. It's not. I'm a defensive guy. The few years I coached a little bit, Pop Warner. I always coach defense, so I'm like, I like it. So, all right, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Army fans, for GoBlackKnights.com. This has been the Army Navy quarterback panel with Christian Anderson and Kelvin Hopkins. Go Army, beat Navy.